This is Saturday, January 29th, 2000. I'm at Joyce Notaras' house in Soap Lake. And Joyce, we just want to talk to you about your life.
Okay.
So let's start with when and where you were born.
Portland, Oregon. November 3rd, 1912.
What was Portland like in 1912? I guess you couldn't remember that though.
I was born on President Wilson's election day in Portland. Otherwise, it might have been rainy and it might not have. I don't know.
So tell me how it came to be that you ended up in Soap Lake.
Oh, that was in 34, I think. I think it was 34, 33, something like that. I was living in Spokane and living with my mother and my sister and my little boy. I'd been married and had left him, and so we were together. And we were, well, that was bad years. I don't remember if it was 32 or 30, something like that anyway. And we were on relief. We had where you'd get a box of groceries every 2 weeks and they'd pay your rent for you. And my sister and I were selling paper flowers. We made crepe paper flowers, and we sold them door to door. And we had a little extra spending money, but we never had, and we paid our rent that way with the flowers we sold. But our groceries came from relief, or whatever welfare they called it in those days. And I happened to be downtown one day with my sister. We were going along Skid Row, going into the different taverns and employment offices trying to sell our paper flowers. And they always had jobs listed on boards, those big, what do you call them?
Bulletin.
Signboards. They fold in the middle and there's jobs wrote on each side. And there was one job wrote there, a waitress wanted, in a town 90 miles from Soap Lake. And they didn't tell the wages. But I went into that place and asked about it, and you had to buy your job and what it cost to buy. And of course I needed a uniform, but the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, if I could get a job and get to work, I could get off relief. I hated that. And so I went to my caseworker in the city hall, and I told her about this job I'd seen on the clipboard and what I needed to go. I said, and if you can buy me a pair of shoes and a waitress uniform and buy me a bus ticket to this town, it's 90 miles from Spokane, I'll take the job. And she did. I also told her I'd be off relief, which I hated, and that I'd pay my mother's and sister's rent, and if they needed help otherwise, I would give them what I could from my $1 a day job. And so I came to Soap Lake. And I worked for James Arvin and Johnny Pappas over at the Soap Lake, at James Tavern across the street, which was also a restaurant. And that's how I came to Soap Lake.
Okay. I'm going to change one thing here. As long as I don't trip. I'm going to turn this off. Because that's going to maybe mess you up a little bit. But what I'm getting is...
No, it's not messing me yet.
Yeah, okay, good.
It doesn't help her that much.
She's got that nice light that I gave her on that other side, though.
Yeah.
Okay. Tell me about what Soap Lake looked like then when you came to work here.
Down on the corner where Shell Station is was a grocery store, and you had to go upstairs to go in the door, and it was a boardwalk in front of it with a banister along the front of it. You went up these stairs, and down, halfway down was the door to go into the grocery store. And there was a butcher shop and groceries and dry goods in this store. And it belonged, I'm not really sure, but I think at that time it belonged to Delancey, Mr. Delancey. But it didn't stay belonging to Mr. Delancey. Mr. Britton bought it. If I remember right, I'm not positive about that. But there was dry goods at one end of the store, and the groceries in the middle, and the butcher shop at the other end. You want anything more about that?
Yeah, well, tell me some more about the, let's do it this way. Let's take a walk down the streets. You came out of the door of that store, that general store, and you headed back this way towards this place. And tell me what you would see on either side of the street.
Well, when I first came, I don't remember if Bob White Cafe was across the street from the grocery store or not. But somewhere in those years, Bob White's Cafe and a bowling alley came up there in the buildings that are there now. The Schrag building was built later. And
Was Bob White there?
I say Bob White's Cafe restaurant. That's the little restaurant that's there right now, but it was Bob White. It might not have been Bob White then. And you come back up on the coming this way. I really don't remember if Myers was there or not. I think the pool hall, the pastime was. I didn't have the money to spend in Myers, so I wouldn't have been in that store, so I'm sure it wasn't there yet. And yet again, it must have been. But you come up this way to the corner of where the Red Dell is now, across the street from the Red Dell on Marina's side. There was a gas station, and it was run by Radke. Have you heard that name in your travels?
This is the first time I've heard that.
Well-
R-A-D-K-E?
Well, I think it was Radke. Anyway, there's a gas station there. And behind that, where Marina's there was either a laundry or a garage in the building where the restaurant is. That was either a garage or a laundry, or it was empty at that time. I'm not positive about that. And down the street from it, towards the beach, was a little plumber's shop. That's across the alley from Marina's restaurant. The New Beach Hotel was on the corner. And there was a restaurant in it. And Mr. White, Vern White, I don't know if that's his first name or not, White ran that. I really can't see the rest of the street. Later on in the years, on the corner across from the New Beach Hotel, which was on the corner across from Marina's, where her office is now, there was a hotel called the New Beach. But across from it, Spencer, a Greek fellow, had a grocery store there, but that wasn't there when I first came.
What, Doc York?
That's up the street, April. For Joy, whoever you are. The drugstore was on the corner, kitty corner from the New Beach Hotel. So that was across the street there. There was a drugstore there, and they had a soda. No. Yes. There was a drugstore in there, and there was nothing, but not when I can't remember that, dear. Do you know, in these years, I was a young woman. I hadn't had a home for a long time, a real home where I could sit down and say it was mine. And I was busy, I think, taking care of my own life and not looking at things around me. Ask me another question, because I'm lost there.
Okay. Tell me about the kind of people that came here, and how many of them, and what they came for, and
We had lots of Jewish people come, and they came for the water, and they came between the months of May and September. They would usually come in around May 30th, Memorial Day, and they'd go home by the 15th of September. There was lots of times when there's over 2,000 people in town, especially during the war years, where everybody would come for a vacation. The shipyard workers would come to have water here, for the Soap Lake water, and for resting from their work in the shipyards. My husband's building, let's go back to the streets. Thorson's was there. It was the same building as it is now. I don't know if there's a number where the across the street down the way from Thorson's towards the other end of town is a brick building. Does that have a number of the year it was built? Does it happen to have its year on it? Where the beauty parlor is now?
there's one that does.
Well, that was built by a jeweler from Seattle. He had a jewelry shop in there for a while. And I can't tell you the years, dear. Up the street, the building, the Blue Rock there, was run by Mrs. Hodgins. And she had her 2 daughters. And that was there when I came, that building. And I worked at James Arvin, and they just built, I worked for James Arvin, and that building had just been built. They had just added a beer parlor to it. There was a restaurant on this side, and then the middle part where there's a dance hall, that was the new beer parlor they had built. And that was when they just, it was finished around the time the dam was finished, because we had lots of dam workers in there. And I would say that 2 ways. Oh, no. Then we come up a little ways, and this place, my home was here. This house was here. But it had been brought in from the dam, brought down on a trailer, and was just sitting here on rocks. And beside it was George's building, which is that building up there in the picture.
Go off. But it's back on now.
Well, it must have been kind of boring, and it got tired of listening.
Well, I don't give my camera that much credit. You sound like some of the Indian people I work with. They give all this credit to these inanimate objects, and that's not allowed.
It's not allowed? Well, it's true, dear. It's true.
I don't know about that. It's the camera right now. I'm like not mastering it yet.
Yeah.
In fact, that's why I wanted to bring it, was because I wanted to learn a little bit more and learn on a real person. So the truth is
my first winter in this house, if you want to know,
yes.
I'll just tell you one little thing. We had a big old railroad stove, round like this, and it was sitting right here, and the stovepipe is right there. And I had had a fish bowl. I always liked to have I always had an aquarium with goldfish. I was nuts that way. But anyway, it was sitting by the window over there. And I had a blanket nailed over this door across so we could go through to the other room. You take a bottle of milk from this room and set it in the dining room on the table, and in about 2 hours the milk would be out of the bottle about that high. Yan said that it froze. You know, the water in the milk froze. And my goldfish bowl froze one night. Mama came to see us and slept in the bedroom over there. There was a door at that end of the room one time. I had it closed. And Mama slept in that bedroom, and we piled all the blankets we could find on her and gave her a hot water bottle, and that was frozen in the morning. That was a bad winter. And of course the house wasn't insulated, and we hadn't, the wind blew under it. It was still on blocks. All the things we were supposed to do came very slow because there wasn't lots of money. And I was happy that I had a home. I never worried about the rest of it.
Well, now, when was that? What time frame was that? And the reason
Well,
I asked,
that might have been in the late 30s or early 40s.
so you were still going through the little bit of depression. And then,
Yes.
is that why there was, you talk about not having money, is it because it was during the Depression?
Well, this is a funny town, Kathy. I don't know if it is yet, but you made your money from May to September in your renting of your cabins. And after September, nobody came over here. You were here by yourself. And when the signpost out there said 259 people in town, that's how many people there was during the winter. It could go up to 3,000 during the summer when there was tourists here. And they came then for the Soap Lake baths and for the Soap Lake water. And as time went along and people got pickups with little, I can't even think what I want to say, little sleepers on them, or had sleeping bags, they began to come and not stay in town. They went out to the parks instead. The tourist trade went down quite a bit there. I always called Soap Lake an permanent town because people would come and stay 2 or 3 months or maybe a year or two, and whoever came would try to change the town. And next thing you knew, they'd start something, they'd go away and leave it, and it'd fall apart. I don't know if you see it yet, but there's always somebody trying to change something in Soap Lake. Frida, could you get me a drink of water? Please.
I'll wait for you to get your water.
We really don't remember too much about that, Frida. I know we roasted a lamb across at Munsky's in the oven.
What was Munsky's?
What?
Tell them what Munsky's was.
Oh, that was a bakery. Mrs. Munsky's still there, but they had a wonderful bakery shop there. The first people that had it was Mr. and Mrs. Haywood. And they were they Mormon or they were, I know I had the little girl over for a birthday party and she couldn't eat wieners, but she could eat the kind that they could buy made out of soy or something like that. I always thought it was so funny that something you couldn't eat, you could eat if it was in a different, well, that's just my thoughts, that's all. Ask me something else, I can't think of anything to say. The baptisms, the Greeks used to come all the time. As I told you, my husband, I thought this country was so much like Greece. And there was lots of Greeks that settled around. There was quite a few in Wenatchee and up at Kashmir and Dryden, where my husband had a beer parlor at one time. And during the summer they came, and when the children were I can't remember the ages, dear.
Well, there were 5 of us, I think.
Was there 5 at one time? I thought it was only. Well, maybe there was 5 the first time. Anyway, we asked different Greek people to be godmother or godfather, and the Greek priest came from not Spokane, Seattle, and we had a baptism out on the front lawn, and it's of course it was Greek Orthodox, and I do remember with April when I asked him to baptize April Joy. He wouldn't baptize her April because that was a pagan name. It was not in the Bible. April wasn't. So she was baptized Joy, Zoe, because Joy was in the Bible. But I was always remembered that particular time because he just absolutely refused to say April for her baptismal name. The other children, I guess, got through. They got names that were close to the Bible.
They didn't give me Frida.
Well, your name was Theophania because it was your father's mother's name. And when I asked him what name I could take from that, I should have used my own imagination. It had been a different name than Frida. But Frida's good, and Mabel is my mama's name. But on your baptism papers, wherever they are, it's Theophania. They made a big celebration out of a baptism. We had roast lamb, and people would bring, all the Greeks would show up from Wenatchee and Dryden. And there was Greek people in Ephrata. In fact, Gus, that's who I want to say, isn't it?
Gus Chris.
Yes, it's still there.
But
there was, used to be when you have something to do with a Greek party, you could round up a lot of Greeks. Now the older ones are gone and the younger ones are too Americanized. You got anything else?
Yes. Were there, first of all, let me just check one thing. Okay, it's okay. Were there any other cultural celebrations that they had in town that, from other cultural events that you remember?
Rodeo.
What?
The rodeos.
Oh, the rodeo would be out there. Someplace they'd have a rodeo. I don't think they ever. You know how the Greek party started? Was it George? No. Gus Chris wanted to have a party all the time, and he would have Greek parties, and he had one at the schoolhouse one year, where so many people came that Marina, I don't know if it was Marina or what, some way it turned out that we had one every year, and that turned into the, what do we call
Greek
that?
Festival.
Huh? The Greek Festival.
Mother,
What?
was Gus Christ or Chris George was a Greek who had a restaurant down here, wasn't it?
He,
I don't think Gus.
Mandelis. No, it was Gus that had that first party at the
Gus?
schoolhouse, Gus
Okay.
Chris,
Okay.
in Ephrata.
Okay.
And he had a lot of Greek people there, and everybody that came to that party said, we should do this all the time. And that's how it started again, or started. And Spencer, down there on the corner in the grocery store, did nothing, as far as I'm concerned, except squeeze my arm. How are you, Mrs. Notaras? How are you, Mrs. Notaras? Up and down my arm with his fingers. God. Funny old man.
Did you remember or ever meet Earl McKay?
No, that was before my time. He was gone before I came. The hospital was built in, he might have been here, but the hospital was built because of him and Burgers.
You knew
And when the hospital turned from a Burgers Hospital to
a regular.
in 1949, wasn't it, that hospital went from,
I was
that was the year I was hurt in the accident, and I was in Ephrata in the hospital.
Okay.
That was the year I had my leg injured in a car wreck. It's never been the same since, but it was all right. God gave me my life, and thank Him for that.
You cooked at the hospital for a while, didn't
I
you?
cooked 15 years at McKay Memorial Hospital.
Wow.
I worked there right after my accident. It was still in the same, it was in the same year. I'd been home from the hospital and I was ironing for people. I could sit down. I was getting around a little bit, but I did a lot of sitting and I did ironing for folks. They'd bring their ironing here to the house, and I remember buying my ironing board. The singer came in one day, and he had sold me my sewing machine, $3 a month, and he wanted to know if there's anything he could get for me. I said, I don't remember his name, but I said, well, you know, there's one thing I really want, but I don't think you'd have it. I said, I want a sit-down ironing board. I've got one on my truck, God love him, and he brought it in, and it was a really nice ironing board, just about this high, where you could sit and iron your clothes. It didn't ever come up to be a big one. It was just made for a sit-down ironing board. And then I took in ironing for people to have a little extra spending money. And now what was I going to come to from that? Going to work for the hospital. I was ironing then because my ankle was hurt and didn't heal properly. But they came one day and they wanted someone for the hospital. They wanted April to come out and work, to do dishes up at the hospital 2 hours every evening. And she had just taken a job out at Park Lake. I think it was Park Lake, where they had the restaurant. Yes. And I said, well, April has just taken a job. She had asked for this dishwashing job, but she did get a job out there, which was better. And so I said to him, well, if April can't take it, could I try? I said, I have a problem. I can't move very good yet, but I just felt in my heart if I got up and moved around, I'd be better off than sitting. And so I took the job up at the hospital. They let me have it. And I worked there maybe 3 weeks as a dishwasher. Then I was cooking supper for 30. And I did that for about 6 or 8 months. And the next thing you knew, I was head cook up there. And I worked 15 years at the hospital. I worked for Gert Phillips. She was a humdinger. Have you heard anything about Gertrude Phillips?
A little bit, but tell me more, because I did actually meet her when I first came here.
Well, she didn't cut any corners. She said what she thought, and what she thought you didn't always agree with. Had me on the carpet so many times, and she had a habit of, if she wanted to scold some person, she'd pick on somebody else to holler at in the presence of the person that was being scolded, really, but it was two people getting the scolding instead of one. She was an English woman, and a spinster, not married woman. Dr. Kearns, Dr. McNamara, who is Irish, worked there. So on St. Patrick's Day, when everybody had green out, she'd get orange and put orange everywhere. Because orange is the opposite color to what has something to do with their beliefs about St. Patrick. They don't use orange on St. Patrick. next day. But if she could make the doctors mad, she was happy. And I remember when April was being born, she was very sympathetic too. She came into the kitchen a dozen different times. That baby's in trouble. That baby's in trouble. They should take that baby. And then she'd go out again. And next thing I knew, April had a cesarean. But she was a midwife in England, and a very knowledgeable woman. She had her, well, she was set in her ways, but she was a good-hearted woman. I liked her. I used to go, huh?
When April had Duane, you mean then, huh?
Well, when April was in labor
Okay.
and was having Duane, she would come in and say that the baby was in trouble, they should take that baby. And they ended up having a cesarean. I don't think because Gert told them, but because they thought so. But she would have had them do it a lot sooner. She would have had them do it a lot sooner. Well, you better think of something else, Kathy.
You used to be with the Ladies Improvement Club here in town, Mom?
Oh, yes, but sister, it's
That's
been
your
15
life.
or 20 years since we had the Ladies Improvement Club.
But that's your life.
Yeah, I want to hear about, that's one of my questions. It's on a list of different organizations that existed here. And
Well, there
so,
was the Ladies Improvement Club, and it was 15 or 20 to 30 ladies that got together once a month, and we would have our meetings in different homes, and we'd have projects for making money. We'd have bake sales, and then we'd have no bake sales. By that I mean we would give in what we would have spent to make a bake sale. That money would go to what we were working for. We put the swing set up down at the beach. We put water fountains around the town. I don't know if the water fountains are still there, but I know we had one one down the street, and there was one down on the corner by across the street from the gas station. I don't know if there's any water fountains left in town. Do you? You know, drinking fountains?
There's one.
Huh?
Two. There's the one out here and one down on the corner.
We had one, I think we put one down on the beach, and we gave $500 to the, now I don't remember if it was the veterans that built the restrooms up at the city park. What's the name? Well, going out of town,
Elder
one
Street.
block back, there's
Elder
a park.
Street. Elder Street.
Well, I'm not sure of the street.
That's what they call it now.
Okay, but anyway, it's one block off the highway, back on that park. The veterans built a wash house, and we put $500 into that. When they did the tennis courts, I have a picture of that. Oh, I have a picture of when I gave the money for the, in one of my catalogs, one of my photos over there. We gave $500 to the veterans for that washroom, and we gave $500 towards the tennis courts. I think we gave money to the tennis courts 2 times from the improvement club, and it wasn't $50 or something like that. It was always up $500. Or at one time it was $750 that we gave of money that we earned, as I say, having bake sales and no bake sales and rummage sales.
And somebody willed you their house for a meeting place, did they?
Not us. There was not us.
Okay.
There was a ladies' club in town. What was the name of the other club? Have you heard any of the club names? This was women.
the Rebecca's
No,
and the Garden Club.
no.
Before that.
I need to know then.
Mrs. Lanigan was the treasurer for it.
So Linda.
Something to do with women. Federated Women's Clubs? and there was one in Ephrata, and they did a lot of, where the senior center is now, they owned that building there, and they gave it to, whether they gave it or however it happened, that building began with them having their clubhouse there that was given to them, and I don't know who gave it to them, or whether they gave it to the city. Who gave that clubhouse to the city?
Do you know?
You haven't heard.
Mm-mm.
Well, Mrs. Lanigan was a treasurer for many years for that club. I know she was a treasurer for many clubs. What I mean, she was a good
With money.
bookkeeper. Her daughter, what's her daughter's name?
Linda.
Linda.
Linda
Her daughter Linda works in,
PUD.
yes, what's her last name?
Bonneville.
You might ask her about I think it was the Federated Women's Club, I think the name
so.
of it was.
That wasn't you.
No, I was in the Ladies Improvement Club.
They just did side by side, so to speak?
No.
Okay.
The Federated Women's Club had a clubhouse. The Ladies Improvement Club didn't.
Name some of the people in the Ladies Improvement Club.
Oh, Ruth Knox, Evelyn Lanigan, and Margaret Pappas, and
Mrs. Arvin.
yes, Mrs. Arvin, and I don't know if Ethel belonged or not, Ethel Clausen. I don't think
think
Ethel
so.
did.
Maybe she was too, Kathleen.
Huh?
I thought she did. Your card parties she was part of.
Well, Margaret and Myrtle and I, and Margaret, Myrtle, and Ethel played pinochle all the time while you kids were growing up, but we didn't have a club for that. We just played pinochle.
Okay.
We'd go in the afternoon to each other's house, have a cup of tea, and play pinochle, and you kids would raise hell while we were playing. I don't know how we ever got to bed.
Well, do you remember any of the plays that the school did for the community?
Mrs. Cuddyback?
Oh, Mrs. Dick and Miss Kittyback, I don't remember the names of them. I just remember one that, I don't remember the names of the plays, but Miss Dick and Miss Kittyback really, that's when it was just those two for the first years I was here, and then Mrs. Graber showed up, who was the kindergarten teacher in the first and second grade.
Mrs. Graber's still alive in Ritzville.
Yeah, and I can't remember the names of the plays. I can remember Mrs. Pappas being in one, and she was English. I know. I think you know. Very English, and she was supposed to be a fisherwoman, and they asked her on the stage what she'd been doing. She says, "Oh, I've been fishing," she says, "and I've caught all these crappies." Well, it just killed the audience because they're not crappies, they're crappies. On top of that, crap means a little something else. But the people that had the play didn't correct her one time or have her change what she said. And I always thought it was kind of mean of them, but it was kind of funny in the play. But the name of it, dear, I can't remember.
Where were those plays shown at?
Up at the schoolhouse. One of the rooms was built with a stage. One of the classrooms
8th grade.
was built with a stage, and off to the side was the kitchen. I've cooked or brought soup to the kitchen many times when they first started the lunches. That was the old schoolhouse, and then they built the new schoolhouse, and the kitchen was in the basement then. But those years
It was a
are
red.
gone.
It was a red schoolhouse. had a bell.
I don't remember if it was red, but I know it had a bell. The bell is in the front of it right now.
Front of Delancey.
Yeah.
What were people like? Okay, let's go back to when you first came here and you were a stranger and you know things were hard. You'd come here for a job. Tell me about the character of the people. How you felt? Did you feel welcomed, or just give any details you feel like going into about the nature of the people of the little city of Soap Lake?
I didn't see many people, just the ones that came into the restaurant. And most of the ones that came into the restaurant were, you know, strangers from out of town. There was one fellow who lived over at the Rock Castle. Karras was his name. He was a World War veteran. He was in a wheelchair. He just was a man trying to live and get along. We had one man here that was on a skateboard. I say skateboard, it wasn't, but he was without legs, and that's the way he got around. I felt sorry for him. I've seen lots of just seemed to me like people were friendly. I know I was so happy when I was asked to join the Improvement Club because I felt like they were friends, but they weren't any of them close friends. My closest friend was Margaret Pappas. I tried to be friends with Mrs. Arvin, but Mrs. Arvin and I kind of were different people. I didn't see eye to eye with her, and she didn't see eye to eye with me. And Ethel Clausen, she was kind of set in her ways. She was a converted Catholic, and she was really converted. What I mean, she went right by the book. But that didn't change her. She was a nice lady. But she was a funny lady, too. She was a penny pincher. She used to say, well, I've got to go to the doctor tomorrow, and I'm getting all the kids' old underwear out so they can wear patched things so the doctor won't charge us too much. Margaret and I used to laugh about that, and we just about die. Every time that she ever got ready to go to the doctor, all the patches and raggedy clothes had to come out of the closet because she didn't want the doctor to charge too much. And I don't think it made a bit of difference with the doctor.
Who was the doctor?
Oh, my doctor was Dr. Ward in Ephrata, and we had a Dr. Robinson here for a while, an older man, who was very good. I went from Dr. Ward to Dr. Piper. From Dr. Piper, I went to Kearns never was my doctor, honey.
Oh, good.
He was there, and I did go visit him once or twice, but he was not my doctor, that's all.
The McNamara's came to town, but you didn't go.
No, they weren't my doctor either, although Dr. John McNamara did give me a prescription for what they call the Black Beauties for dieting. I had a wild 3 or 4 months taking those. It was terrible.
Oh.
That's when my heart palpitations started, and I asked Dr. John, I said, could these things here have started that? Oh no, those won't do anything to you. But the palpitations stopped about the time I stopped taking those. So I figured that I was taking something I shouldn't have been. Wake up in the middle of the night and get up and scrub your walls, you're nuts, aren't you? There was Jim Lombras was one of the Greek fellows. He'd raise vegetables during the summer and go around selling them to different places. Um,
Then ice?
what?
Ice? He
Oh,
brought ice later?
well, he may have taken care of ice. I never needed ice because we had the beer parlor then. We get our ice differently than that. I can't remember too much about the different people. Everybody seemed to be friendly, but I've always said that Soap Lake was I want to say this word, impermanent town. People were coming and people were going. You have people come in and stay for a year or two with big ideas of how they were going to change things. Well, the next thing, they kiss you goodbye, and that's the end of it. Then there'd be more people come. And of course, during the summer, there was always the summer visitors. And I was busy during those years raising kids. That's all I can say about that.
Did you know Mr. Israel?
No. I did, when I was working in the hospital, try to send him food, but you could not send in food from our kitchen. He had to have his own food.
Kosher.
He was very, very Jewish. I think he let himself drink our coffee, but that was about all. But I didn't know him. I heard lots about Mr. Israel. I know he offered my husband $10,000 for our place here, and we could live on it until we die, but he would give him $10,000 for it. So he would have it. But Dad said no. And Mama said no. That's me. I used to hear lots of stories about Mr. Israel, but never knew him.
You mentioned your mother a few times too earlier. Did your mother move here?
Mom came down and lived with Dad and I. Different times. She'd stay with my sister a few months and then come and live with us for a few months. I would have had a hard time raising my kids and doing the things I had to do during the summer without my mother. She was really my backbone, you might say, for the things she did for me. I could go with my husband to Wenatchee if Mom was here because she'd take care of the children. It was just many things that Mama did.
Did you go pick apples?
I went a couple of years, but it didn't turn out. I went to get my chairs for the dining room, and I got a piano picking apples. And Mom stayed with the kids during that time. Took Tony and Marina with me one time. They were about 7 and 8, 6, something, 9 and 10, something like that. But anyway, we went to Maxwell's place up at Dryden and picked apples, and Mrs. Maxwell came in one day and said the kids had gone and picked all of her squash she was letting get right to the winter. Never forget that. Nothing you can do about a squash that's been picked when it's green. Well, anyway, I think I went 2 or 3 different times, but when I went, Mom was always here. She'd run the place and take care of the kids.
Yeah.
And that was getting to be a time when there wasn't any renters. People didn't come then like they used to, like they did at the beginning, you know.
You wanted Daddy to modernize.
Well, we wanted to modernize, but there was no way to modernize. With the money you'd have had to do it. We didn't have it, and not enough foresight to see that we could make it back, I guess. Well, you're putting shoes and teeth on kids. You don't always do everything you think you should.
What are some of your fondest memories from living here in Soap Lake?
Well, I think my fondest memory is having a home. Not having to get up and pack my suitcase and move to a different place. That I did so many times when I was a girl, I was sick of it.
Having your first son come home, Mama?
Well, that was a good memory, but there was others just as good. Waking up in the middle of the night, somebody knocking on the door, and knowing as they knocked that it was David. But he hadn't told us he was coming. Seeing my grandchildren, who I hadn't seen for a long, long time. And when you brought your boys back from Germany.
Okay.
I can think of things that were, I can't think of really joyous things. Just living here is joyous, but I can think of times that were bad. When Marina came in and stood at the end of my bed and said, "Mama, I totaled the car." When they called me from Wenatchee, no, they called me from Ellensburg and said that my son was in the hospital there because he'd totaled his car on the way home from Wenatchee, from Seattle. When they called me from the hospital and said they had Nick up there, he'd been unconscious for 3 hours from playing basketball up at Heartline. He'd hit his head, and the doctor telling me that he had to quit basketball or he'd liable to end up an epileptic. I remember when I was so frightened when there was the earthquake and Frida was in Seattle with the 2 little boys. How frantic I was to get through on the telephone and nobody could get anywhere. I finally got you though, didn't I?
When Daddy died? When Daddy died?
Oh,
yeah.
Dear, that's a sad time. But you see, I wasn't with him when he died. The sad time was when Daddy and Marina stood behind me at the sink in the hospital. I was peeling potatoes. I turned around and looked at her and she was crying and she told me Dad had died. When my little niece, little Carol Ann, came home and told me Mama wouldn't move because she was sitting by the sink and she wouldn't move. Those were sad times, bad times, and there's lots more there, but they don't come up all the time. You can't sit and think about the bad times, and
life goes on.
What?
Life goes on.
Very much so. Keeps going. Now some of my bad times is when I find where I've missed a damn stitch in the knit crochet.
But I get to fix that one for her.
Yeah. I lost my needle someplace there.
Just a moment, I'll find it for you when she turns it on.
I got it.
Got it? Okay.
Frida, do you want to get by?
Yeah, I can sneak up past there, okay?
Okay, go ahead.
I do have to leave here pretty quick, too.
What time is it?
1,
Is
20,
it?
25, 20 to 1.
It's
No, it's got to be.
Oh, that's your clock.
10
It's
to
11,
1.
20
10
to 12. 20 to 12.
20 to 12. That's better.
Okay.
Well, I got less than a minute left on this tape,
Okay.
but I want to put another one in. I'll just let this one run out.
You can't possibly want anything more, can you?
Well, probably could. You know, we could do. Do you have any photographs? Old photos?
Well, they're all in my albums over there.
Anything and everything.
Give me some of those paperback ones. What I mean, not that.
Not over here, other closet?
No, right there. Had a picture there on a newspaper picture of my 3 granddaughters and the lobster they caught or their dad caught back east, 36 pounds.
Whoa. Big.
Just bring me several of those books.
These look like high school ones. But they're
Well, there's high school books there, but there's photograph albums there.
okay. Paperback. Maybe this.
They're got pictures on the front of them. They're
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, do that. Yeah. So, what are some of the things that kept you here? Reasons why you stayed?
Well, the reason I stayed is it was my home. I told my mother many times when I was young that if I ever had a house of my own, I was going to stay in it until I died. We did lots of moving when I was young. Getting up in the middle of the night so we didn't have to pay the rent and taking our things and leaving a place. One time in Portland, I went to Los Angeles. I went to 2 different schools in one day. Not for that reason, but because Mother had rented one, of course, and then she found one that was better that she liked, a room that was better that she liked better, and came and took me from the school I was in at noon for me to go back to another school in the afternoon. I can't tell you how impermanent or how much we moved when I was young. Mom didn't have a husband. He was killed in the war. She had 2 girls and she was trying to find a job. And Mom was on the heavy side. She was pretty to me, but I have an idea there was a lot more people more attractive than she was for jobs. And she had a hard time finding a job to keep, where she kept it. I don't know all the reasons Mom didn't keep jobs. She didn't. I just loved it here. But when I first came, I was really lost without trees because we had lived mostly in cities, and what living we'd done out of cities had been in where there was forests, woods. And I liked the smell and the sight of the big trees, but there wasn't any around here. But I gradually grew to where I loved it. And for my husband, it was just like his home as far as he was concerned. He lived at Aranomi, and his home was right on the waterfront. And of course, his dad was a sailor and owned his own boat, and Dad did a lot of fishing with his father for food and for selling until he was 12 years old, and then he came to America.
Where did your parents meet?
My parents?
Yes.
Kathy, I didn't know my father, and I never talked with my mother about him. So I can't tell you anything about that. Although well, I really don't know, dear. Mother never talked about my father, and she never talked much about my sister's father. I do know I couldn't find my birth certificate when I wanted it because the building in Portland, the city hall, had burned and the records were destroyed there. My sister found her birth certificate in Seattle, in the Seattle archives. What's funny about this courthouse business, the birth certificate burning, I spoke about that to, I was talking about birth certificates to, gosh, I can't think of his name, one of the men that worked down at Don's. And he says, that happened to my mother. She was born in Portland too. So I'm not telling a story, somebody else that happened to. It was the first time I'd heard that from somebody else. I want to say Craig, it wasn't Craig. Carl. Yes, Carl says his mother was born in Portland and she couldn't find her birth certificate. She tried to find hers when she was 7, I guess, when she went to school. And they gave her one just born in Portland. I didn't want mine until I wanted my birth certificate. Till I wanted to get my passport to go overseas. I went overseas, for treatment of cancer. I had cancer of the pancreas. And we heard about a doctor in Greece that was treating people for cancer. And Marina got me over there. And I stayed 30 days and went every day down to this doctor's office to have an injection in my arm, about 10 cc. A little bottle of the liquid, about 1 cc, I don't know how many cc's, anyway, a little bottle about this tall of liquid injected into my arm. That's 6 days a week. And came home at the end of 30 days, and I've been okay since.
When was that?
That was, I think that it was in 1979. And let's see, I'm 87 now, and I think it was in 1979. Someplace in there. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a month in Greece then. Athens is a big, big, sprawling town, and the dirtiest place I think I've ever been in, as far as litter, on the streets. I don't think anyone ever bought anything in that town that they didn't throw the bag either on the ground or out the window to the ground. There's lots of trash cans around, and they were all overflowing too. There may have been a shortage of labor while we were there, I don't know. Seen lots of army trucks and army people during the time I was there. I think the students had caused some kind of a uprising, and they had these army people out for, I guess, to scare people into control. I didn't see anything bad, or just seen so many army people, that's all.
So your mother basically, as you were saying earlier, raised you and your sister from the very beginning.
Yes. When other people weren't trying to do it for her. My mom was born in the Blue Mountains in Oregon, and she lived there until she was 2, and then her father took the family to Pateros, Washington, and they lived there while she was growing up. And Her father at one time was a sheriff of Okanagan County. Is at least according to what my mother told me. And his name was John Hatch.
So I'd be your grandfather.
Yes, my grandfather. But I never knew him. And really didn't know any of my mother's family. She was kind of a free spirit. And didn't do much letter writing or things with her family. So I really don't know that family.
Do you remember how it was that you ended up in Spokane after being in Portland for a while?
Oh, yes. That's a story in itself. Big story. Mother took us to California when I was 11. And we lived in Los Angeles for a while. Went to school. Changed schools. Went down and lived in Phoenix, Arizona for a while. When I was about 16. 16, I think it was. Where I met my first husband, and I was married there. And then which was a foolish thing. Didn't like my husband. Well, I guess I loved my husband at the beginning, but when there isn't work and a man doesn't work and there's no money around and things go bad, I guess you see that every day with different people. Anyway, I left my husband and went with my mother up to Frisco. And lived there for a while, and then we went up to Sacramento, California, where my little boy was born, John David. We didn't have a car at the time. We did hitchhiking. We hitchhiked from Phoenix to Los Angeles and from Los Angeles to Frisco. And on the man that picked us up halfway up to Frisco was a veteran, and he had a large touring car, and he was touring the United States, and he was making his living to do it by selling paper flowers. And he showed me and my sister how he made the paper flowers and told us what he sold them at and taught us how to do it. And so when we got to Frisco, Mom got an apartment, and I got crepe paper and wire, stovepipe wire, and you would buy bunches of greenery from the florist. Shallal leaves, which are a large leaf on a stem that are really green, and then the huckleberry leaves that are small leaves and very shiny. They're pretty. And these leaves, if you take care of them in water, will last from 6 to 8 weeks in water without turning brown and falling. And you'd put the rose on one of these stems at the end and make a bouquet of roses out of it. Put a couple of buds in it, and you'd sell them by the bunch. You'd make them in bunches of 6 with a couple of buds. And you sold them at that time. When I first started, my spiel was, "Good morning. Would you be interested in any artificial flowers on natural foliage? The foliage will last from 6 to 8 weeks. if they're kept in water. And they're 35 cents a bunch, or 3 bunches for $1. And we also traded them for canned milk or a dozen eggs or anything else we could get hold of. That's the way we lived while I was waiting for my baby to come, because I had, of course, being a young girl, I became pregnant right away. That's how I got to Sacramento, California, and Frisco on the way, and a few other towns in between.
So now tell me how you got from San Francisco. Well, let me ask you this, where was your son born?
Sacramento, at home.
Tell me about that.
Just that we lived in an apartment, and I was selling flowers, and then it got to where I couldn't sell flowers, and then I went to Dr. Jones, and he said mother asked if she could be a midwife at home, and he said yes, and I had my baby at home. And I had my baby just like all people have babies, a lot of hollering. But I had a beautiful little boy, a little 9-pound, 10-ounce baby boy. Because my mother said to me every time I sat down to eat, "Remember, Joyce, you're eating for 2," which I took to heart. And I got quite heavy. And I didn't lose too much of my heaviness from then on.
What year was David born?
31, I think. Yeah, 31. It was a lot of depression at that time, not much money. I had left my husband and I had my baby. He found me in Sacramento and came back. He was still the same, whatever I want to call him, man. And some way we got a hold of a car. I'm not sure. I think Mom's brother sent her some money, $25 or $30, and she bought a car. And I left him again, and I stayed left from him from then on. Never seen him again, thank God.
So then tell me how you got from Sacramento to Spokane.
Oh, when I left my husband in Sacramento, my mother and I took a map and decided where we would go. And we picked a town that was big and that wasn't too far, that I could drive. And we went to Salt Lake City, Utah, and lived there for a year, or a winter. Sold flowers there. But Salt Lake City was not a hearty, warm place. It seemed to be, I don't remember it as a really friendly place. So we decided to leave there, and we got the map out again, and we picked Spokane. And we came up to Spokane. We'd drive until we ran out of gas, and then we'd go, if we were in a town, Mom would go to the city hall and speak to whoever was there. And they give you 5 gallons of gas and a couple of dollars worth of groceries and tell you to get out of town. And that's what we did from one town to another till we got to Spokane. You don't have to write all of that down. Those are things I shouldn't even talk about.
Oh, I think they're fine. So what happened when you got to Spokane?
We found an apartment, and the first thing we could do was to get on relief, you know. At the same time, we sold flowers to pay for our rent. And that's when I got the job down at Soap Lake. Told him I was tired of living the way I was living and I wanted to have a job. And I think it's wonderful that there's relief and welfare to help people. I thought it was wonderful that I had a caseworker that could see that I didn't want to live that way any longer. And gave me a chance to come down here and go to work. And about that time, WPA came in. You know WPA?
Yes.
That took people and trained them for different jobs, taught them to sew. My sister and mother got into WPA, and Betty got a job. About that time, Betty was old enough to work, and she found a nice Italian man that was working for WPA, and she got married, and they had a lovely family, and Ernie was a wonderful man. And when I came down here, I found George, and I had a good family and a home. And Betty had a home. She's still living in her home, so I guess she felt the same way I did, that if I ever had a home, I'd never leave.
Well, when you tell me about when you came here, what was the name of the place you worked for, and how you actually
James Cafe.
Okay. That was across the street here.
It's at the building right over there that's there now. And there was booths in there, and there was a big range in the kitchen, and I think the range is still in the kitchen. And Jimmy was a good cook, and Johnny Pappas ran the beer parlor. He was a feisty little fellow. Nice man. Had a lovely English wife, Margaret, my best friend. Jim, if you were in the Jim and you worked for James or Jimmy, you did not stand around. If there was nobody in the place, you had a pan of water and a rag and you were washing something. He says, don't let anyone look in the window and see that you're not busy. He says, no one is to see you not busy. And he wanted that of all of his help. He said, if you're not busy, they won't come in. And he was right, you know. But you washed those booths so many times you thought you were going to wash the paint off of them. And the tables and the chairs. And the glasses and the dishes. And you didn't work any 8 hours. You had more than an 8-hour day. But you had your room and board and a buck and that and a few nickel tips. So you got along all right.
So tell me how it came that you met George.
Oh, Dad. God love him. He used to eat at Jimmy's. He came up from Dryden to fix Mary Kern's place into a beer parlor. He had bought it from Mary Kern's. And he was making a beer parlor in the bottom of that big building there that had been a bathhouse. He left 2 of the big tubs in the back, which were, he put them upstairs in the building. And the boilers were there for hot water. And he used to come in and have coffee and eat every now and then. And of course, I was young, and he was nice looking and had a lovely smile and beautiful eyes, kind. So I turned around one day to the man and I handed him a glass. I said, here, I said, hold this a minute. And he did. And then I said, that's long enough, and he dropped it. That's the way we really got acquainted, okay? Of course, it shattered all over the place, and I thought, oh my God. Well, Jimmy didn't die anyway. He asked me out, and we married.
Back in those days, if you got asked out, where would you go for a date?
You drive around these damn roads around here. That's the only place you could go. Drive around and park. There wasn't any, not, well, you could go swimming, which Dad and I used to do in the summer, even after we were married. You know, down in the lake, because the lake was, I thought, a wonderful place to swim. Lots of people got sores under their arms and on their body if they wore a wool bathing suit, because the water would rub and was very strong with mineral then. Lots stronger than it is now. But if you wore cotton, you were okay. What I mean, it didn't, but little children, little girls with bathing suits over their breasts, that water would rub on their nipples and, you know, make them sore. It was strong water, that's all. But if the children went swimming, I'd say, well, you go down and you swim, and then you come out and you dry before you run around. If they would dry themselves, it never happened. But when when the suits were wet is when it happened. But my kids lived up to be lived all right and grew up to be mothers, so that was all right.
There was a place that I've been told was called Bare Butt Beach.
Well, they must have called it that. We called it what? The nudist colony is what we called it. Over that side of the lake, there was some rocks, and the water was nice. There even might be buildings there now. There's some big trees over there around that place. People would go over and go in the water without suits. But there wasn't a cult of any kind or anything. If you just wanted to go in the nude swimming, you went over there. I never went. And I don't know many people that did, but I know there was lots of people that wanted the sun all over their bodies. I've seen people come here with, one lady in particular with ulcers on her leg, and they were bad, up the backs of her legs, ulcers. And she was here 6 weeks, 7, something like that, and they were healed. Soap Lake has a tendency, the water did at that time, and whether it does now or not, I don't know, of drying from the inside and healing from the inside. It often made a cut or a wound look worse than what it was, but that would be because it would be healing from the inside. And if a person would keep on with the water and the sun, gradually it would heal. I don't know if you've talked with anyone that's had anything like that or not, but I've seen it happen. I've seen one man come with his hands just like this, and these cracks open. So sorry that you felt like crying for him, you know. And he was here 6 or 8 weeks, and his hands were smooth and beautiful when he went home. But he washed in the water, and he sat in the sun. And I don't know if the sun did it or if the water did it. There's a big debate about that, I'm sure. But the two of them together did miracles on these different people. And then there was some that came that didn't do a thing for them. So it really maybe had to be the person that was using it and the belief they had in it. I've seen young girls with psoriasis, you know, where your skin scales and it's so bad, cure it up and go home with smooth skin. They'd always take water with them, and I don't know if it lasted or what, but I've seen it cure a lot of people, you know, make them feel better.
You mentioned earlier about meetings of some of those Burgers patients. You talked about the guy on the board.
Yes.
Tell me some more about the Burgers patients that you might have met along the way.
I had one man that lived in the back in one of my cabins. He finally bought a home here, Seeger. He had 2 sons. you just felt sorry for them. They had the burgers in their feet, and you could see that they were in pain all the time, and the water, of course, being strong, hurt when they used it. Well, I had several people in the cabins with burgers. But if they kept at it, it never cured them, but it took some of the pain away. They had to go through pain for it to stop hurting, but they gradually got to where they could live with it without hurting every minute. I do remember Charles Seeger because he had these two boys he had to send to school, and felt bad for that man. And there was another fellow here, Ben Knox. He had burgers. I don't think I ever had seen a lady that had burgers. But you know, that's many years ago, Kathy. Really more than I want to remember.
Are you getting tired?
No, I can stand. I can take it.
Okay. Would you describe, like in the summer, as you said earlier, that it was real busy here, and that was definitely the time of year where things were happening.
Yes.
And this would be, let me get a good time frame here. You came here in 1934. We were in the middle of the Depression. You got a job. It was a home. Would you say that the number of people coming here was still to get recreation or whatever for the healing was affected at all by the Depression?
Well, the people that came to rent from us, and we had lots of Jewish people. I always put that to the Jewish people, but anyway, to come, you'd have a room for, you might have a cabin for $3.75 a week. They would work for an hour to get you to come down a quarter. Do you know what I mean by that? Then the next year our rents went up $1. I watched the rents go up as the times kind of changed. But, well, we got it for this last year. I said, but this is this year and things are higher. You know what I mean? In the selling of the cabins. But people really, so many of the Albanians and Greek people that came because this country was like their home, and it was cheap for them to live here. And the Jewish people, it was kind of hard to get along with the Jewish people. They're good people, and I know they love their families and they're good people. And not talking about Jewish people mean, but they were very hard to get along with. They got to where they brought their own things, but if they rented a cabin with cooking facilities, they had to have new things. They couldn't use the things that had been used before. Of course, in the years past, I've kind of heard something about Jewish living, and I have a grandson who turned Jew with his two boys. There are certain things they can't cook in certain pans, and if they can't cook in a pan that's had milk in it, unless that's the only thing that's had in it. You know, so we were trying to make a living with $4 a week for a cabin. If we had to buy 2 or 3 kettles and new spoons, we didn't make a living. Do you get the picture, or do you, dear?
Oh, I do.
And I used to watch my cabins. I'd have to count my things I bought and I put them in. I had Jewish people leave the cabins more than once. It took my new things with them. You know, anything bright and shiny that was new went. I got to where I'd ask them to open their bags to let me see. And take back what was mine. I kind of felt like Scrooge a lot of times. But then again, I felt like I had children to raise, and I had to raise them the way I could. I had one Jewish man take me out on the back porch of my cabins out there, and he said, "See what you do when you haven't a refrigerator?" And he had 3 apple boxes stacked up, a pan of a dishpan of water on the top, and a sack tucked in it, gunny sack, and it hung down on the 3 sides, around these boxes, and the water seeped from the pan down through the rag, the sack, and made it cool inside those boxes. I was always amazed by what they could do with when they didn't have anything, you know. We gradually bought second-hand refrigerators as we found them, or second-hand ice boxes at the beginning. We used to buy chunks of ice. That was right at the beginning. And the grocery store I told you about down on the corner, Britton's had an ice house out and back, and they would cut ice from Soap Lake during the winter and pack it in sawdust in this ice house, and then have ice to sell during the summer. Did you ever hear that?
No, that's interesting. I knew they had to get ice from somewhere.
Well, they cut it from Soap Lake. When it froze, it didn't freeze mineralized. It froze as water. And I have an idea people didn't use it for water like we do now anyway. They used to keep things cool. And then, down on the corner down here, up a block and a half, on that side of the street is a building that used to be, I'll say an ice house. It wasn't an ice house. What do we call it? Where we would take our food. They had shelves and cubicles in there. They rented by the month, where we'd take our food to freeze, to keep it during the winter. What were one of those places called?
Not an ice house.
Oh.
Mm.
Were you around when they were going on, where people made a living out of renting these? Now that's been made into a home now, but that used to be where we would take our food. Like Dad would go down and maybe pick a tub of asparagus from the orchards, when it was coming up before they started all this spraying. And I'd put the asparagus in little bundles, and then we'd take it down and freeze it and use it during the winter. What you can buy in the markets now, people used to put away by themselves then.
Did they have canned goods back then?
Oh, lots of canned goods, everything. But with us, if Dad found an asparagus patch, it was wonderful to have that to freeze things in. I've even frozen wild greens. You wilt them and wrap them and put them in the freezer, and then you cook them, when you want to use them. And we never had anything like that in this house. I eventually got a deep freeze that I kept on the front porch there, and I could put my food away there, the things I wanted frozen. Now you go to the store and buy it. Then you couldn't always buy it, and sometimes if you could buy it, you couldn't afford it. But if you could go out and pick it and put it away yourself, you could afford it.
Where would you go to get those kind of things around here?
Dad went to Wenatchee to the apple orchards and picked wild asparagus. During the spring, if you watch, the mustard greens are just prolific around here. What I mean, there's lots of young mustard greens around, which are really nice when you cut them and clean them and cook them. I think asparagus was my biggest thing that I put away. Or if you happened to find a farmer that was selling a bushel of beans, snap beans, they were good to freeze. Although I rather like the string beans, I would rather can them myself. They come out more tender if you have a canner and can at home. I used to can up to 200 quarts of fruit and vegetables every summer. Tomatoes, peaches, apricots, pears. When I could find it, asparagus. But when I did a lot of that for my first 13 years in this house, I did that on the stove, a wood stove. And that was a job. Sometimes the kids were around to carry in the wood, and sometimes it was me, that carried in the wood. And I cooked in that little kitchen that's in the back right now, where the coffee came from. I had a wood stove there in the corner. I don't know how many times I canned from that stove in the blistering heat during the summer with no air conditioning. And how many Christmas dinners and turkey dinners I made on that wood stove. A turkey in the oven and every hole on the top of the stove with a pot on it. Oh, if I had to do it now, I don't think I could, but I could sure show somebody how. I'd have up to 13, 16 people at my dining room table at Thanksgiving or Christmas. In this house, the children were growing up. I had 2 boarders, Bill Black and John Peoples. Now, Bill couldn't see very well. He walked with a cane, a white cane, although he did see some. I think he must have had what I have, where he could see but not really see. And John Peoples was an old Scotchman. Every time I served oatmeal and the kids would go, he'd say, "Eat your oatmeal," he says. "That's what we feed the horses in Scotland, and look at those horses." Oh dear. My mother, John Black and John Peoples, 7 children, my husband and myself, at that dining room table, and sometimes a visitor or two, kid-wise. I remember one time, while Marina was in school, the home ec teacher was doing ethnic cooking, and she wanted something Greek. So Marina asked me if I would make delmados for school. So I made a big pot of delmados here and cooked them and made my egg sauce to serve over them. And I took that to school with me, and then we made delmados at school out of raw cabbage and the meat and rice and things, and put them together for the girls to be cooked. And we heated up my dish for them to eat and see what it was like. That was a nice day. The kids all enjoyed it so much, and of course Marina liked me doing it. But that was when she was in home ec in school. I don't know if that's interesting or not.
Oh, it's great. Don't worry about that. These are great. These memories are what I like to hear.
Mm-hmm. I was so happy that she asked me, and it was kind of a big job to do. I remember when we got the new schoolhouse and they had the kitchen up there, but they didn't have a cook. And there came a snowy bad day one day, and they needed something hot for the kids that couldn't go home. And I had a big kettle here with one of those round kettles with a handle on. You could hold like this. I made that full of potato soup. And then I don't know where Dad was, but there was no car. I walked right up behind Munsky's, up over that hill, in the snow, and took that soup to school. Never forget that day. That was one of their first hot meals on the schoolhouse, the old schoolhouse. Everybody liked the potato soup. Well, I like to make potato soup anyway, so it was good. Well, you'll have to ask me something because I can't think of anything more.
Well, you were talking about what the cost was of a room for a week, and I was kind of interested in that. You talked about the
Well, with the first year we rented was $3.75 a week, with a little wood stove you could cook on and a bed. No water in the cabin; you had to carry your water. No bathroom; you had to go out to the bathroom. No shower; there was a shower in the yard that you could use. Then it went up to 4, and then it went up to 5, and during this time there was no linoleum at the floors at the beginning. I used to scrub wood floors to make them clean for the people to move into. And then by the time they move out, be grease around the stove, and you'd have to do the scrubbing over again. Because nobody that lived in them ever scrubbed. That would have been too hard. And we gradually got hot plates for the 2-burner hot plates, and fixed a table where a hot plate could be used instead of the wood stoves. And then we gradually got small electric stoves in the cabins. But quite a few of them had hot plates, because most of the people on vacation usually wanted to come and just warm something up and eat. Didn't do a lot of cooking while they were on vacation. And then the refrigerators. First we had ice boxes, then we gradually got refrigerators, although I still call them ice boxes, because I called them that for so many years. And we were always looking for a place we could buy one second-handed, because we never could afford one new. I remember my first new refrigerator. My gosh, I was in 7th heaven. To think I had a new refrigerator was unthinkable, that's all I can say. And then in my kitchen, I had my first hot water over there. That was just something, to be able to turn on the faucet and have hot water. My gosh, I think I was 13 years in this house without hot water in the house. Nobody knows what it's like to live like that. Of course, you always had the tea kettle on the stove, but you didn't always have wood in the stove burning. You always have to make a fire to do that. Then when I bought my first sink with a stainless steel sink, two holes. I think I still have that same one in there, I'm not sure. And clean drawers. It came in a case, clean drawers on both sides. Oh, that was something. That was wonderful to get a new sink. Somewhere in there, my uncle died in Pateras. My Uncle John. And he's the one that used to send my mom $10 every now and then, which made a big difference in us girls' lives while we were little, and in her life as she was older. Well, he left her, was it 10,000? He left her $10,000 in his will. That was Uncle Tony that died and left her the $10,000. And Mother had passed away by then, so of course it was given to us 2 girls. But my Uncle John then, who I'd never seen before in my life that I knew of, came and talked to me and wanted me to put my money into his apple orchard. I said, no, I don't think I will. I said, there's things I need. So we got the money and divided it between us. We each had $5,000. And I think that's when I got my first electric stove. And that was a big joy in my life. And I think now kids that get married and have to have everything they want on the shelf, they have to have so many things. I wonder if they enjoy them like I enjoyed the things I got. I don't think anyone could have had the pleasure I had with each new thing. that came into this house. You think about having it for so many years, and then all of a sudden it's there. It's nobody knows what it's like except me and the other guy.
That's great. Thanks for sharing that.
Yeah.
I'm not done though.
Oh, you're not.
Mm-mm. I just like hearing it. How did you make it in the winter after the tourist season ended?
Well, you know something? The Wilson Creek State Bank is a wonderful bank. Every fall, Dad'd go and get a loan. It's about $700 or something like that. $750, something like that. And we'd live on that during the winter. Then, and sometimes we'd live on it for a year, but usually about once a year we'd have a mortgage burning. We'd collect the $700 and give it to the bank and get to burn our mortgage. And for Christmas, Sears and Roebuck is a wonderful store. It'll let you charge. And so I always had a charge account at Sears and Roebuck. And I'd buy the kids' school clothes and their Christmas presents from Sears, and then spend the year paying it off so I could do it again next year. And you always seemed to it that you paid those little bills that helped you live. You couldn't make them and forget them. You had to pay them. I bought my first sewing machine from Singer. My only sewing machine up to this one. He came to the door and wanted to sell me a sewing machine. I said, I can't afford one. I said, I need one in the worst way. He says, well, let me talk to you a while. And he did. And he said, you can buy this for $3 a month. And that's what I did for $3 a month. And it was $90. So you know how long it took me to pay my sewing machine. And then the vacuum cleaner man came by. They always know a sucker when they see one. And he had an Electrolux. Well, I never had a vacuum cleaner. We always used a broom and a dustpan and a mop. And he sold me a vacuum cleaner for $3 a month. And that's the way I bought my first vacuum cleaner. It was $3 a month. And my sister used to come up once in a while from Spokane, and she would and ah about these different things I had. But she smoked, and she always had a pack of cigarettes. And I said, Betty, if you put your cigarettes down and put your money in a jar, you could have those. But I don't know if she did or not. She still smokes. I used to have to think so before I made those decisions, because it wasn't a question of just reaching into a purse and taking $3 out. You had to put it there 50 cents or a quarter at a time, to be able to have that to send when you were supposed to. It wasn't that $3 just laid someplace for you to go pick it up. It went together with pennies and nickels and dimes. Oh, there's another little thing. One day the sheriff came to the door. The marshal of Soap Lake, I guess he was a policeman, and all the kids were with him, 5 of them. I don't know where the other 2 were, maybe. Anyway, Marina came in first, and she opened her hand, and she had a silver dollar in it. She says, Mama, I found a big nickel. And the policeman came behind and said, she really found it, Mrs. Notaras. I was there when she picked it up. As if he thought I was going to think she'd stolen it someplace. And the kids were all so awed by that big silver dollar. You don't know how awed they were. That was something. Pick up a silver dollar. Mama, look at my big nickel.
made those, when the singer guy came to the door, and then later the vacuum cleaner guy, and you knew that you needed those, did you consult George, or were you making the decisions yourself?
I think there was a little talking with Dad. Dad is Greek, was Greek, and is Greek. And I signed the checks, but he made them out. Can you understand that? He could make the checks out for me, and I could sign them, but that had to go through him. And same with the children with their earnings. He asked them, he says, just give me 10% of what you earn. They always could get money from him, but if they earned $2, they gave him 20 cents. You got it? In Greece, I never could make a check because that Greek women just don't handle the money. And he was Greek. But he was a wonderful husband, so I have no complaints at all. I just was really happy when I finally got my own bank account with my name on the check. And when I went to work at the hospital, half of my money went into the family budget, half of what I earned. Sometimes a little bit more than half if we had bills that many, but the rest of it was mine to spend. And of course mine went for children's clothes, or for yarn for me to knit with, or for magazines that I liked to read. But our income wasn't to where I could buy everything I wanted, so I liked having this extra money because I could do with it what I wanted. In other words, I wasn't taking it away from the family or the house. Because there was always bills. There was the water and the electricity and maybe a payment to the bank. Just always something we had to buy.
When you did that canning in the summer and talked about how you'd have that stove going, were you able to pretty much take care of all your wintertime needs with the canning you did during the summer?
Well, with fruits, yes. I did tomatoes and peaches and pears. Many meals with just a bowl of fruit and toast, you know. I never bought any fruit during the winter unless it was bananas or oranges, because you can't can those things. But we always had peaches on the table, you know what I mean, as a dessert. And Dad would bring peaches home sometimes, I think by the truckful. I've had 5 or 6 boxes of peaches, 40-pound peaches in a box sitting in the dining room, done up to 20 or 30 jars. Never could get much more than 30 jars a day because you have to boil them a certain length of time, you know, to get them so they seal properly and they don't spoil. I didn't like canning vegetables so well, except for tomatoes. I was always afraid of vegetables. If I'd had a steamer, do I mean steamer? Well, anyway, the kind of, a pressure cooker. If I'd had a pressure cooker, I might have done more vegetables, but vegetables have to be cooked a certain length of time, and they can develop botulism very easily. And so I didn't like canning vegetables. I liked the freezing part of the vegetables because I didn't worry about botulism. You know about that anyway. But I'd have 200 or 300 jars of fruit in the basement, made lots of dill pickles. My kids were crazy about the dill pickles. Most kids are. tried making sweet pickles, but I never did have luck with that, so I gave that up and did what I could do. Had a good canning, recipe for dill pickles.
What about meat? How would you fare with meat?
Well, I cooked with lots of stew meat, soup meat, lots of liver, kidneys, heart, until my husband went into gout, and I kind of cut down then because he couldn't have that. And beef, I cut down on beef. With chickens, I did quite a few chickens, but usually we would buy from a farmer, and Dad would kill them and I would dress them. And we didn't have many steaks. If we had steak, it would be round steak, which I would pound with a knife and flour and cook fast. It was very good, the round steak, but we didn't have that too often because there was too many people at the table. Of course, we had it with small portions. Never just as much as you thought you wanted or thought you needed, but you always got by with what you had. I made lots of soups and stews, lots of spaghetti and noodles and beans. Our favorite dinner was chili beans on Saturday night with cornbread, one of the favorites. They like fried chicken awfully well. I did lots of fried chicken. I raised chickens a couple of times, and then butchered them off all at one time. I remember one time we did 50 chickens for the freezer, which is a lot of chicken to take care of in one day. When you're wrapping them and putting them away, Dad one time bought it was a cold winter, and he bought a shank of, a quarter of a veal, and he hung it. That was the year that we were the first 2 or 3 years I lived here, we moved over to the apartments that were in back of the house because they were easier to keep warm than this house. And he hung that shank of veal in the kitchen of this house, and if I wanted meat, I would come over and cut off what I wanted. And it hung there for 2 months during the winter, frozen. It was that cold that winter. Every night was cold. It never thawed, and it was very good. It was good meat by the time really good meat by the time we got to the end of it, because longer meat hangs, the better it gets. It doesn't spoil, it just ages. I don't know what it is about it. I guess they age it in stores anyway. But we didn't always have all the bacon we wanted, that I thought I wanted. You just went kind of on a budget, you budgeted out what you could use, what you could have, and when it was over, you waited till the next time. That was all. Was never any thought of, and there never any hunger in this house. There was always plenty of food, because I cooked big pots of spaghetti and big pots of beans, and made enough of the filling food to fill the kids. I think they were all happy when they were little. I didn't have any skinny ones, I know that.
Do you have any other memories of some of the your visitors that came through here? You mentioned one burger's patient that came through that you felt real bad because he had kids to send to school. Was there any others that you remember talking to you about? So
Oh, you mean other people?
Yeah.
Well, the man I told you about in the wheelchair at Thorson's had burgers. That's why he was in the wheelchair. Had amputations though from it. But I don't remember particularly about him. And Seeger had the children. Ben Knox, I know, had burgers, but he was a very retired, when I say retired man, I don't mean that. I mean, he was not a man to talk. I heard of other people coming, but none were my friends that I knew of. So I can't say. No, I don't know of any others. Or if I do, they're tucked away and I can't get at them.
Okay. Now, didn't President Roosevelt come through here?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Well, that was a big time. Everybody put up bunting and flags, and my husband, who had the beer parlor over there in the bottom of that building, where that front is, he put a table out there and had a grill plate. He was going to make hamburgers for everybody that was in town. Bought things to do that, and that President Roosevelt was supposed to stop here. He didn't. He just went right through as fast as he could up to the dam. It was kind of a fizzle. It was a holiday, but it was a fizzled holiday, okay? What have you heard about it?
Well, I heard that one of the things that he did when he was here was cut a ribbon to open up the highway that went up there. That was the opening of the Highway 17.
Well, that's all right. He could have cut the ribbon, but he wasn't down this end of town. In other words, at my end of town, nothing went on.
Which would be right here.
Yes.
So did he drive just down the highway and that was
Down
that?
the highway. He was on Highway 17, and that's where he stayed.
Huh.
Okay?
So he didn't even come down Division here
No.
on Main Street.
Mm-mm.
Were people expecting him to?
Well, I guess if my husband was, he had a hamburger stand out there. A couple of hot plates, you know, and a frying pan. He was going to make hamburgers. No, he didn't come down this way. If he did, I didn't see him, dear. And I didn't see him out on the highway because I didn't go down. I kind of laughed about it at the time. I think a lot of people did. Except George didn't. He cussed. Oh, Lord.
What do you remember about when Grand Coulee Dam was finished? What kind of feelings there were around here then?
Well, really, dear, I came down about the time I don't remember any particular feelings. I guess we had feelings about it because we lost renters. We must have had feelings about it because when the dam was finished, people didn't live here. Those people that were working on the dam left. I do remember that when the Air Force was out there, we had lots of people in the cabins, wives of the men that were in the Air Force, you know, out at Larson, and the one at what was the one in Ephrata Larson also. Yeah. I think it stretched all along there. Anyway, we had lots of the wives that stayed here. You know, the wives and children. So, by lots, I mean we have 9 cabins to rent, and we had them rented. And of course, we missed them when that closed down. My daughter Frida used to work out at the air base when they had the missiles out there for the company that put the missiles in. I don't know if the missiles are still there or not. But I do know Frida worked out there. I can't think of anything else.
percentage of people do you think came and visited Soap Lake for the healing waters?
Well, when I came, we were 259 on the billboard, on the population sign at the edge of town. Do they put that population sign up anymore?
Yes.
What is it now?
I haven't looked at it, but it's more than 259.
Uh-huh. In the summer, we would have up to 2,000 people in town. What percentage would that be? And they would be here for the water. Everyone that came to bathe in the lake. And that was the first 4 or 5 years that I lived here. It used to be in the evening, you'd sit out on your front, I'd sit out on my side over here, and there'd be a stream of people coming down the street on one side and going back on the other side. It was before air conditioning, and people were out for a breath of fresh air before they went into the house. And there'd be a stream of people for about 2 hours. Families walking along, talking, going from one end of the town to the other. It was really something to see, Kathy. But that was just during the summer months, during the hottest part of the summer months. But there was lots of people that came. But I can't tell you percentage-wise. Unless you think of us sitting here with 23 cabins, just my husband and I and 7 children, and then you have the cabins there, maybe 2 people in each cabin. That's how it added up in the summer, you know, and most houses had 1 or 2 cabins to rent, or 1 or 2 rooms to rent. That was the income of Soap Lake. At least that was the income I seen. Except for McKay Memorial Hospital and Marina, who else hires a lot of people here in town? Or did then even? So you'd have to think of the percentage yourself in your head.
Well, 100% of the people were coming here for the water, it sounds like.
Yeah, they were coming for the water to bathe and things like that. They, maybe in the fall, we might have had a group during the fall that came for the bird hunting, you know, in October when the bird season was on. But there never was so many that you couldn't walk down the street, you know. There wasn't that many.
Where do you think these people found out about Soap Lake at?
Word of mouth. One person tells another. I don't know if there was any Soap Lake advertising done or not. I really don't remember, but I'm sure. And I say word of mouth. I found out about Soap Lake when I was about 10 or 11 years old by my mother talking to me, because she came here when she was 17 with inflammatory rheumatism. And she was carried in by buckboard and in a stretcher to the Smith's Hotel over there because she couldn't walk because of the inflammatory rheumatism. She was here 3 weeks, and she danced on the night she went home. On the days she went home, the night before they'd had a dance for her, and she danced. So she was here 3 weeks, and she raised me on that story. I heard it not once but 100 different times about going to Soap Lake and how Soap Lake water helped her and how strong it was. She says the Indians would take a horse blanket and lay it in the water for 2 or 3 days, and when they went to pick it up, to take it out, it would come off in chunks. The water, the mineral in the water would eat the wool up. Now, and Mother lived at Pateros, Washington, and that's where she came from. She came down to Wenatchee by boat, and then up from Wenatchee by train. And they let her, she was out at Grant Orchards, is where the Soap Lake Station was.
That's interesting. I never knew that.
Mm-hmm. But as I say, I was raised on stories of Soap Lake. So when I found out from that employment agency, when I got the job that I was going to Soap Lake, it was almost like going home because it was a word I knew. You understand that? And Mother was so surprised too to hear that that's where I would be at Soap Lake.
So that was the first time you came, was when you came for that job, and all those years your mom told you that story, you never
Yes,
visited?
I'd never seen Soap Lake, never been here. The only thing I knew was that Mother had been here at one time. I took the job without knowing where I was going, except I knew I was going to be about 90 miles from Spokane. And it's really more than 90 miles, but that's what they had on the blackboard.
So even then, you didn't know you were coming to Soap Lake till
No.
you actually got here.
Mm-mm. Yeah, I thank that lady, and I hope she knows I thank her. Didn't have enough sense to thank her then. Oh, I thanked her at the time she bought my shoes.
So tell me that again, how that worked. She had to, you told her that you would take the job if she did what now?
If she'd buy me a uniform and shoes and pay my bus fare. Buy the job. The job had to be paid for. You couldn't get it for nothing. Those employment agencies lived off of the jobs they sold. You understand that?
Oh yeah.
I told her I was so tired of being on relief, I didn't know what I was going to do. And I was tired. And it's a wonderful thing to have if you need it. But who wants to live like that? Not me.
Did you continue selling flowers after you moved here?
No. My sister may have sold a few, but I quit the flower business entirely. I rolled some one day just to see if I could do it, and I can, and I could. Crepe paper didn't seem to be as nice as it was when I was using it. You'd take and you'd cut your leaf, and then you take a knife and you'd go like this, on the crepe paper, and it'd curl, and you'd take your thumbs, you'd go like that, and you'd make the shape of the round it out, and then you would take one and you'd roll it up into a small cylinder, another one, another one, another one, another one. They made about 8 petals, and put it tight together. Take a piece of wire and twist it around the end here, piece of green strip paper, and you take right here and you go and roll the stem. And then you'd get your greenery, and you'd take and you'd just wire that little bit of wire around the top of the green, and you had a beautiful rose out of crepe paper. And they were very pretty. And during the Depression time, people couldn't afford flowers in apartments and rooms, But they could afford a quarter or 35 cents for a little bouquet that would last for a few days. It wasn't like they were just buying something that would be thrown away tomorrow. Just to go back, in some places you'd go back where they'd been there for a long time. She says, oh, it's be time for me to get new ones, It was nice. And it was a blessing to my sister and my mother and I. And I like to remember it. It was fun. It was times you didn't like it, when you got onto a block where nobody was home and nobody would answer the door. But then you would find another neighborhood where everybody was happy, and doors would open, they'd buy flowers. Oh, I can't afford any, I haven't any money, but I've got a couple of cans of canned milk here. Could I trade for that? Sure, you could trade for that. Another place, I got a dozen eggs. It's a live and give world. People were nice. People were good. There was some that were cranky, but Maybe they had something to be cranky about, who knows. Anyway, I like that. I thank that man that stopped that day and gave us a ride. We were hitchhiking from Los Angeles up to San Francisco. My mother, my sister, myself, 2 suitcases, and a cardboard box with my cat inside the cardboard box. And this people picked you up and gave you a ride. A bundle like that. Can you imagine that, Kathy? Would you stop for a mother and 2 children, a cat, and a couple of suitcases? People were wonderful, that's all I can say. And many of them bought us a meal, which was better than ever. Talk about bums. We were bums. But there was quite a few periods in my life where Mother was trying to take care of us, and some long-nosed old woman would get into it and have us taken away from her, and we were put in juvenile homes, which not a happy part of my life, and I don't like to talk about it much. I was at the Sisters of St. Saviour's in San Francisco, and I'd been there 3 years, I think. We went to school, and we had meals, and we had a nice home. There was 24 girls there, and 4 sisters and 2 helpers. And we went to public school. We went to different plays and things like that, but we weren't with our mother. My sister was 3 years younger than I, and she had a little job there that was kind of funny. She used to empty the cat box for the cats that the sister had. She had 4, the sisters did. I don't remember all their names. One was named Dondo. But anyway, this parrot, she had a parrot, and the parrot would sit out in the backyard and holler, "Jane, cat box! Jane, cat box!" Because the sister would call Jane like that to get her to empty the cat box, and change it. My sister just hated that parrot. Oh. Anyway, we lived at this place, and Mama got a job up at Lake Tahoe at Fallen Leaf Lodge. That's a lake that's right off of Lake Tahoe, and it's called Fallen Leaf Lake. It's there now. Anyway, she got a job cleaning cabins. So she told us girls about it. She says, "Joyce, you pack some of your sister's things and yours in this suitcase." She says, "and you come downtown and we'll go there." But I was not to ask anybody about this, I was to do this on the quiet. And so I packed the suitcase and I set it out in the vestibule. In that house they had a door to the outside, and then a little hallway, and then another door to go in. So I set it in the vestibule there, and I told Sister Harriet Clare, I think, was in the kitchen at the time. I said, "My sister and I want to go buy a present for my mother's birthday." This was in May. And we had our coats on, and it was Sunday. We'd been dressed up for church when it was in the afternoon. So I took my sister by the hand, and we went out the back door and down the walk. And Betty went up the stairs, or Betty Jane, went up the stairs and got the suitcase, and we walked over to the corner where the streetcar comes. And the streetcar ran every 45 minutes, and it wasn't there then, and we waited for the streetcar. Now, we were right inside of the building, but we waited for the streetcar and got on the streetcar and went down and met Mama downtown, and she took us to the bus depot, and we got on the bus and went up to, the bus took us up to Fallen Leaf Lodge. And oh, we were having such a good time there, and Mama was working, and we'd been there about 2-3 weeks. And the proprietors come and said, Mabel, we have to send you back to San Francisco. The court there says that your children are juvenile wards and you have to take them back. So that was the end of the job, and they paid her. And they put us on the bus to go back to Frisco. And we got on the bus and drove down the road with the bus. And pretty soon the bus came to a certain place that was high in the mountains near the lake, near Lake Tahoe. They got away from Fallen Leaf Lodge. That was quite a ways in. And we were out on the main highway, and they stopped at a store for somebody to buy something. And Mother says, where is this? And they says, oh, this is the road to Reno, and it goes by Lake Tahoe, and it goes down to Reno. And Mother looked at Betty, and she looked at me. She says, get your suitcases. And we did, and we got out. And we walked over onto the highway and got a ride into Reno. And Mother waved her hand at Frisco and the juvenile authorities. So we were with Mother again for a while. Okay? Were you interested in that?
That's great. I'm loving it. Just keep on going, because now I want to know what happened next.
I'm not going to tell you anymore. That's enough.
That was good. You got to Reno, though.
Yeah, we got to Reno. Mama got a cabin, and us girls picked strawberries for a while, and I don't know how, I can't remember how we got back to Frisco again, or back into California. That part I'll always remember, because it was such an adventure. We were going to be with our mother, and we just wanted to be with Mother so bad. And no matter what I said about my mother, she wasn't a bad woman. She was my mother. So that's the end of that story. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
And I'll tell you this, I'll let you know this. I know this has been a lot, it's long. I got 8 more minutes, a little less than 8 minutes on this tape, and I just would like to keep going just to fill that tape.
Well, go ahead and ask me questions. I don't know if
Okay.
I'll tell you anything interesting, but I'll try.
Everything you've said has been interesting. You know, I've been here 2 hours, Joyce.
You have.
So it's been interesting enough for me to stay. No, this is great. Okay, oops, bumped my camera. That doesn't help. All right. That was fascinating. Go ahead. Well, because I guess we're still working around to you getting to Spokane. So, how old were you when you finally did move to Spokane?
Well, let me see. I was 19 or 20, something like that. Let's see. David was 3. I must have been about 20, because I came down here now. Yeah, I was about 20 then. Yeah. Well, we decided on Spokane, in Salt Lake City, and we really didn't have any money. We were on relief. The Mormons there were awfully good to people that were on relief, gave them lots of good groceries. One thing they gave us that I liked all my life was sauerkraut with caraway seeds. Have you ever had sauerkraut with caraway seeds? Well, it's sure good. Anyway, it was good the way they fixed it. But we got in this old car we had, a Chevrolet, was it a red Maxwell? I think it was the Maxwell. Was it the red Maxwell? I can't remember when we got the Maxwell. Well, I'll say it was red Maxwell. Anyway, we had the seat cut down. It was a touring car, and we had the back of the seat cut on each side, and then hooks on it that would hook it up. But during the night, we would lay that down, and Mother and my little boy would sleep in that, in the car. My sister and I usually slept on the ground. we God did something wrong there. We just started out. We picked the best place we could on the map to go to, and we thought Spokane would have enough people in it that we could live by selling flowers. That's what we looked for, because we had been selling flowers in Salt Lake City, but we really had no money. I don't think we ever had any money much, so we would go as far as we could on what we had, and then go into the police station, and tell them that we were in trouble, and we needed gas, and we needed some food, and usually in most little towns, they'd give you enough to get out of town, and maybe a couple of dollars worth of food, to keep you going. And we cooked by the side of the road, and we lived by the side of the road. What I mean, at nights, we'd pull off and do our cooking and eat and go to bed, and get up early in the morning and start out again. And we went up to New Meadows and worked in the peas there, picking peas, and that was 30 cents a bushel. And there's a lot of peas in a bushel. We really didn't make any money, but we managed to live on it. And from there, we came over to Spokane. I don't know if we got enough money together for that, or if Uncle Tony sent us some money and we've moved on that. But I know we finally got to Spokane, and we rented a little room down there on Stratford Street, I think it was. Stratford or Spofford, and that's when I went to get the job for, from there is where I went to get my job for Soap Lake. That's I'm having trouble here. That's when I got, came down here to Soap Lake. Wasn't here maybe more than 2 or 3 days I met George. We had a short courtship. But that's about all there is of Spokane. Just know I wanted to get off relief so damn bad I couldn't taste it. Now ask me something else and I might be able to talk about.
Well, I was wondering, when you came here, you had David with you, didn't you?
No, David stayed with my mom in Spokane. And after I was here for 2 or 3 weeks, after I got married to George, Dave came down. You should have seen that little boy. He needed a father really bad, because he just mocked everything Dad did. He walked like him, he talked like him, and it got to where people would say, "My, that little boy is sure like his father," which made Dad feel really good, and me feel good too, because you worry about your kids and changing their lives. But he needed a daddy, and George was a wonderful dad for him. Yeah. I used to be cooking something on the stove, and Dad I'd be doing something else in this cabin, and Dad would come in with David, and David would be tiptoeing, and Dad would be tiptoeing, and they'd reach in the kettle with a fork and take out something and then run out on the hill and eat it. That tickled my little boy to pieces. Dad called it pinching. He says, "You always have to have a pinch before you eat, so you can know if it's going to be good or not." During the war years, our building over here, we took the rooms out upstairs, and they had the Baptist church was upstairs I think it was the Baptist church was upstairs in my building for several months because there was no buildings there was lots of people in Soap Lake during the war years because of the soldiers out at Larson Air Force Base. Their families, and there wasn't enough room for anybody. And so they needed a church, and they used the upstairs of my building until they could build one or find the right building. And then the bottom of our building next door, that big building, where Dad had the beer parlor, Dad had lost his license by then, and it was empty. They had the first and second grade there from school. Hilda Malonis was the teacher. And they had the classroom there for, it must 2 years, I guess. The Soap Lake School was, first and second grade was in the bottom of my building there. And that was when we were at war, and there was so many people in town with the workers out at the air base. The company that was out there, what did I say before? Well, they were building something out there where Frida worked. There just wasn't room in town for the people there was, so the building got used for more things than a beer parlor and a hotel when it was there. Trying to think of other things I can talk about.
Well, you can take a break.
Well, I'm breaking right now. I can't seem to have run out.
What it is my tape's going to run out too. But I'm not really. I feel like I'm not done.